To the January, I'm sorry, welcome to the March 19th meeting of the Cities of San Diego Resiliency Advisory Board. I order at 1:17 p.m. I will do a quick roll call to confirm member attendance. I call your name, please say present. Eric Lardy is present. Will Meyer, present. Secretary Garrett,
Present.
Board Member Gong,
Present.
Board Member Harris,
Present.
Board Member Morgan.
Present here.
And do you have any statements to read or anything, Board Member Morgan?
Probably I couldn't find it. This is a just cause. I'm just sick.
Okay,
There is no one here in the room with me, and I will alert the board if that changes. What else should I say? I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry.
I think that's it. I think this, if anyone over 18 goes in the room, you have to let us know.
Okay, I will do that.
Board Member Jones is absent. Board Member Clampett. Present. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 2, the Resiliency Advisory Board acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay, Luiseno, Quepeño, and Kuya. Today, the Kumeyaay people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and their cultural traditions as vital members of the San Diego community. We are honored to share this space with them, and we thank them for our stewardship. Do you want me to read the public comment stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Before we move on, I will review the instructions for providing public comment at today's meeting. For those attending in person, if you wish to address the board with an item on today's agenda, please complete and submit a speaker form before the board hears the agenda item. You will be called at the time the agenda item is heard. You may also address the board on any matter not listed on today's agenda. Please complete and submit a speaker form. However, California's open meeting laws do not permit the board to discuss or take any action on non-agenda matters at today's meeting. The board may add the item to a future meeting or refer the item to staff or a committee. For those attending remotely, when the item you'd like to comment is introduced, or when it is time for non-agenda public comment, please raise your hand by either tapping the raise your hand button on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or by dialing *9 on your phone. When it is your turn to speak, click the unmute prompt that will appear on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or dial *6 on your phone. There will be a 2-minute limit per commenter.
Chair, have we skipped?
No, we're going to item number 3 next.
Adoption modification.
Yes. So next is adoption modification of agenda items. The agenda for today's meeting was distributed and published. Would any members like to request modifications to the agenda? Okay.
Yes, I would like to. I move to change February 19th, 2025 to 2026. Small clerical thing.
That is a good change. Is there a second? Second by Board Member Clampett. All in favor, please vote aye. Aye. Okay. Item number 4, are there any announcements or board member comments?
I have an announcement.
Okay.
Mayor Gloria is asking San Diegans to provide feedback that will help determine which programs and services are prioritized and which are reduced in light of the upcoming budget deficit. He is requesting that all residents who live within San Diego city limits take a 5-minute survey. You can find this survey at sandiego.gov/budget survey, all one word. The survey will be open until the beginning of May 2026. And the request from the OBC here is that fill this out if you're interested, and that you also pass the information along to other San Diego residents as possible. Julia may follow up with an email to you guys.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, and thank you for joining us, Board Member Gong.
Sorry, I'm late.
I'm just rolling into it. I hope we understand.
I have an announcement as well. First of all, that budget survey is really fast. I did it, it was less than 5 minutes actually, but in our collaboration with the city of San Diego and other cities in the region, where we have 2 application periods open right now on San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative side. We're looking for an extreme heat community artist to help us design coloring book and other communication and educative materials for our extreme heat communications campaign. So you can tell it's very hot today. So we want to raise awareness. And then we also have a application period open right now for any nonprofits who serve within the San Diego region to help us identify and co-develop some pilot projects that can later be implemented throughout the region. So I can send those links over to, well, Julia should have those links, but I'll send the links over so that they're included in our updates and announcements.
Great. All right, with no other announcements, we'll go on to approval of minutes. The draft minutes of the February 19th, 2026 are attached to the agenda. Are there any corrections, comments, or motions for the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Okay, motion by Board Member Harris. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Board Member Gong. All in favor, please vote aye. Aye. Any opposed or any abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay, we will move on to non-agenda public comments. First, do we have any non-agenda public comment in the room? Okay, then moving online, if you have non-agenda public comment online, please indicate by raising your hand or pressing *9 on your phone. Okay, seeing none, we will move on from our non-agenda public comment and move on to agenda item number 8, information items. So our first information item is our resiliency topic for atmospheric rivers, flooding, and changing climate. Scripps Institute of Oceanography with Dr. Deanna Nash. Board Member Clampett, anything else you want to say to introduce the items?
Yeah, absolutely. So grateful for Dr. Nash for taking time out of her busy schedule to be here today. She represents the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at Scripps. The center is a leading expert globally on atmospheric rivers and their impacts, and also for developing decision-making tools such as extended range forecasting capabilities, providing information to the hands of water managers, reservoir operators, folks that focus on emergency response. So we have partnerships with the state of California, water agencies from across the state, federal government through NOAA, US Air Force, National Weather Service, and trying to understand this weather phenomenon and its impacts to our state and more specifically, as Dr. Nash will talk about, to San Diego. And so we're very grateful to have her. She's a researcher with CW3E. I don't know if you want to say anything else about the work that you do.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a precipitation and geohazard scientist. So my area of expertise is thinking about when atmospheric rivers come in and trigger extreme precipitation that then results in impacts such as flooding and landslides. So today I'm happy to tell you more about like what atmospheric rivers are, and when they cause flooding, go over a couple of the recent storms that happened this past year, among sort of pivot to what we can expect with the changing climate here in San Diego's. So California has very high precipitation variability. So what this means is that looking at this bar chart showing annual rainfall in San Diego by calendar year, some of those bars are really small, some of those are really high. So year to year, there's a lot of difference between whether or not we're getting a lot of precipitation or not a lot. And this variability, this high variability, means that it's very difficult to predict precipitation in California and San Diego. Looking at this map, this is showing that coefficient of variation. So those pink shadings, the lower number is indicating low precipitation variability. So it's easier to predict that type of precipitation. So eastern US is fairly easy to predict, or easier to predict precipitation there. And in California, we have those blue, green shadings indicating that higher variability, just highlighting that our state has this challenge of precipitation forecast. One type of storm that we see here in California that result in precipitation are atmospheric rivers. And so these are long and narrow bands of intense water vapor transport in our atmosphere, very much like rivers in the sky, that when they cross from ocean to land, the water vapor within the atmospheric river gets lifted, condenses, cools, and can turn into precipitation. So this image here is showing what the atmospheric river looked like that reached San Diego on the 17th of February of this year, where the kind of orange shading is indicating that water vapor transport, and then the arrows are indicating the direction of that transport. One thing to highlight is that really just a couple of these atmospheric river events per year produce a very large fraction of California's water supply. So we really heavily rely on this storm type to give us most of our precipitation and water every year. So on one hand, they're very beneficial because they're giving us the water we need, the water we rely on. But on the other hand, when they happen, they can result in extreme precipitation that triggers impacts such as floods. And in fact, atmospheric rivers are responsible for up to 90% of California's floods. So I have this image here on the left from New Year's of this year, where San Diego received 2 inches of rain in under 24 hours. So some flooding happening in the city here. And then the map on the right is showing these red dots that's indicating the proportion of insured losses due to atmospheric rivers between 1978 and 2007. So the larger the dot, the higher number of insured losses that are associated with atmospheric rivers. So very high on the US West Coast here. So one program that we have at our center, which is an excellent program, is called the Atmospheric River Reconnaissance Program, or we shorten it to call it AR Recon. And this program is designed to gather data in and around atmospheric rivers in order to improve those forecasts. So looking at the schematic here, we think about our atmospheric river as this sort of slug guy on the image, that's the yellow and orange. We have satellites that are collecting data, but sometimes there are gaps in that data. And so what we do as a part of this atmospheric river reconnaissance is we fly airplanes through, across and around the atmospheric river and drop these little drops-on guys, which is about the size of a Coke can. It has a bunch of measurement sensors in it, has a little parachute that comes out, so it gets dropped in the core of the AR of the atmospheric river, collecting data from above the cloud top all the way down to the surface. In addition, we also have drifting buoys throughout the Pacific Ocean that is a part of this program that is collecting data in order to improve these forecasts. So as an example of one of these flights that we've done this past year for atmospheric river reconnaissance, I have this image here. This is from February 4th, 2026. And so again, those like red shadings, orange shadings is that atmospheric river plume off the coast of the US. And then this black line with all these dots is the path that Hurricane Hunter aircraft flew. And at each dot is where they dropped a drops-on to collect some of that storm data. So at this time, at this particular time, the green dot is where the plane was, where they dropped the storm. And then this image on the right is an example of some of the data we collect from that drops-on. So dropping from up pretty high in the atmosphere and the little sensor collecting data all the way down to the surface. So some cool things about this in this example, where the blue line and the red line are really far apart, indicates it's quite dry in the atmosphere. And then where they're really close together is where it's really moist, where there's a lot of water vapor. So that water vapor flux is quite high, closer to the surface. This makes sense because atmospheric rivers, the majority of the moisture within them falls in the like lower 10,000 feet of our atmosphere. So this information, as we collect it through atmospheric river reconnaissance, it's collecting information about this atmospheric river before it reaches the coast. And so then that data is assimilated or brought into the forecast, and it improves the forecast before the precipitation hits the coast. So we've actually seen significant improvements in precipitation forecasts since starting this program. Another part of atmospheric river reconnaissance is launching weather balloons at different locations along the coast. So CW3E will send up these weather balloons like in this little animation here. Big balloon attached to a string, there's a parachute and also another small sensor that's collecting really similar data to that drops on. It's not always as easy as it seems in the left image. So here's an example of one of the more recent storms we saw. This is on the Scripps Pier at UC San Diego, where it was quite windy and a really big challenge to kind of wait for the wind gusts to sort of die down so they can let the balloon go without hitting anything and making sure it gets up in the air to collect that data. And then similar to those dropsons, here's some of the data that was collected from the Scripps Pier on the 16th of February of this year. So a pretty big storm that we had. I think this is from one of those time steps. So again, you have that where the red and blue line are really close together, super moist, so indicating the presence of that atmospheric river. And in this case, the moisture actually extended up fairly high. And so that information about the vertical profile of the atmospheric river is really important in terms of knowing precipitation outcomes. It's really cool data that we gather. So I mentioned that this project has improved precipitation forecast skill, and I did want to demonstrate by how much. So this plot here is showing different amounts of precipitation. So the blue bar is like 0.1 inches of precipitation, yellow bar is 1 inch of precipitation. And this y-axis is showing how much of a percentage increase or improvement in that precipitation forecast skill we've seen in California. So for 1 inch precipitation at a 3-day lead, we've seen about a 12% increase in precipitation forecast skill, which is incredible. If we put that into context of how much precipitation forecasts have improved over the past 25 years, it's about the same. So we've seen a 12% improvement in forecast skill because of the atmospheric river reconnaissance data that we've assimilated in under a year. And that 12% is how much we've seen precipitation forecasts improve in the past 25 years without that data. So here, this focusing on this blue line, starting in 2000, this is the success index of precipitation, that's QPF, about 15% in 2000, increasing up to about 25% in 2024. So this is just really going to show that having these observations has significantly improved that forecast skill of precipitation in California. Really impressive. So diving into some of the storms that happened this year and flooding impacts, we've seen about 4 atmospheric rivers since last October. In San Diego, here's an example of the Christmas Day atmospheric river, so a little smaller plume there. Here I have an image showing, this is the USGS river gauge that's near the Fashion Valley, So these little peaks are indicating peak flows in the river. So it actually lines up really well with our 4 storms that we saw, our 4 atmospheric rivers we saw this year. So we had an event in mid-November. This here is our Christmas Day storm. This peak that goes into minor flood stage was a New Year's Day storm that 2 inches in under 24 hours we saw. And then our storms in February here, putting this river in action stage. So for that New Year's Day storm, here's what that atmospheric river looked like. Again, we got about 2 inches of rain in that 24-hour period, but actually that 2 inches fell in just a couple hours. So here at the Fashion Valley rain gauge, we've got 3/4 of an inch in just under an hour right here on in the evening of January 1st. It's just really showing these atmospheric rivers when they come in are just really raining out. And yes, there was a lot of reports of flooding in the city and county. looking at that February storm, that's the most recent. Been a little obsessed with this storm recently. We did launch radio sound balloons from the Scripps Pier during these storms. So here's some images of those balloons. We launched them every 3 hours for the duration of the storm. And then here on the right, I have an animation showing the kind of atmospheric river plume coming in, 2 different kind of ways to view it. And then on the bottom here, each of these kind of stacks of arrows is a radiosonde launch that we did. And so collecting that vertical profile of that data. So it's really cool to see it as time passes. So starting time over here and then all the way through the storm, kind of seeing the vertical distribution of that water vapor as it passes. And there was a break that we did have to take for that storm, but really cool that we captured that. If we just sort of zoom into that bit in the front where we collected that data and align the time with the Fashion Valley rain gauge, this is really kind of cool. So you've got, no precipitation and then a little bit, but then at the time where the water vapor flux in the atmospheric river was at its highest is when we saw about a half an inch of rain in under an hour on the 16th of February. And then this map on the left is showing kind of a snapshot of a map view of that atmospheric river at that time. There were a lot of impacts reported during that February storm. So lots of flooding. There was a swiftwater rescue, which is pictured here in Spring Valley, multiple tree falls, traffic delays, you name it. Additionally, this is kind of cool. There were 2 what we call narrow cold frontal rain bands during this February storm. And so this is what that narrow cold frontal rain band looks like. Here we're just looking at, this is like radar reflectivity. So those like red values are a kind of a good indication for precipitation. So these narrow cold frontal rain bands are very narrow, long, and short-lived, small, fine-scale features that are embedded within the atmospheric river that can really deliver super high intensity precipitation in a really short duration of time. So this is 4 a.m. on the 17th of February. I've pulled out the rain gauge from Poway here to kind of highlight that there was 0.19 inches in just under 15 minutes. That lines up right when this narrow cold frontal rain band was passing. At the time, this actually woke me up when it passed over me at my house. My dog was pretty upset. This storm also saw a lot of convection or like lightning and thunder activity. And that lightning, a couple of those lightning strikes that happened resulted in a fire at a nursery in Escondido, which is pictured here. And then this animation on the right is showing lightning strike frequency, which is not super common in California, lightning strikes, but just interesting that it happened during these storms. Moving into kind of, okay, we get these storms, they're important for our water supply, but they can result in these impacts. What can we expect from the future? Historically, we've seen that 5 of the most 10 recent years on record have been the hottest and driest. So here, this graph is showing these dots where the temperature is on the x-axis and precipitation is on the y-axis. So the larger the dot, the drier the year, and the darker the dot, the warmer the year. So highlighting that some of these more recent years have been very dry and warm. And if we sort of project into the future, what can we expect for annual precipitation in San Diego County? We found that there is a lot of uncertainty, as well as a lot of variability. So year to year, that's kind of these like squiggly year to year, expecting just that high variability to continue into the future, even with the different climate models or the different colors, and then lots of uncertainty there in the kind of shading. Thinking about the end of the century, late century changes, we expect to see a lot less days where there is precipitation, so fewer wet days overall. So this is showing the frequency of precipitation days. But on the right here, we're expected that the intensity of those wet days will increase. So a lot less rainy days. Sort of this year is probably like a good indicator of kind of future conditions. Not very many rainy days, but when it rains, it pours, and then we see these impacts, like flooding. Atmospheric river-related precipitation is projected to increase by the end of the century. So this map here is kind of over San Diego, and the hatches are indicating statistical significance, but very dark blue indicating a higher increase in precipitation change that's related to atmospheric rivers. On the other hand, non-atmospheric river-related precipitation is expected to decrease. So we're really expecting in the future more atmospheric river precipitation. So we really need to focus on better understanding these atmospheric rivers as they come in. Another sort of thing to think about in terms of atmospheric rivers are these sequences or multiple atmospheric river events in a row. This was demonstrated in winter 2022-2023, where we had 9 successive atmospheric rivers in a row in a 2-week period. And then this bar chart is showing the number of daily local storm reports in California colored by the type. And so we get a lot of impacts, especially when you start to stack up multiple events in a row. So you might get one really weak atmospheric river, doesn't really do anything, but then a couple of days you get another one and then another one, and it sort of just starts to stack up. And so in the future, these are, the blue is the historical, these colors are the different climate models going into the future. But we really can expect an increase from the historical period into the future of the frequency of these atmospheric river sequences. So again, anticipating higher impacts associated with these atmospheric rivers. So overall, atmospheric rivers are driving our water supply as well as our flood risk and other impacts. They are expected to intensify in a warming climate. Therefore, improved observations and forecasting are critical to protecting communities like San Diego. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's open up to questions.
Well, I just have a really basic question. Is rain and precipitation just synonymous?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess rain here, yes. Precipitation includes rain and snow.
Okay. Right.
That's a good question.
Other questions?
I was curious what ecozones are associated with this projection of fewer wet days but more intense atmospheric related precipitation. So what type of ecozone would be looking like in the future?
So it's my understanding that San Diego County as a whole is like a wide variety of ecological zones. And so those maps there seem to be across the entire region. I guess.
So for example, we're what, semi-arid Mediterranean right now, and I'm just curious, well, for example, what other geographical regions are associated with our projected weather or projected climate that you're talking about?
Oh, like the expected increase.
Yes, so what would it look like in terms of vegetation? I know we're not turning into a rainforest, but if I were to think, okay, this is what our ecosystem looks like, our ecozone is now, what can we expect it to look like in those conditions?
Yeah, I guess in my experience, the like fewer wet days, but more intense storms when they happen aligns more with that like desert type behavior. So you have not a lot of rainy day. I mean, we already don't get a lot of rain here. It's like less than 10 inches on average per year compared to some other locations. But yeah, I'm not a like ecological zone scientist. I'm more water in the air.
Thank you.
And I don't, just like jump in, I don't know if this would impact eco zones so much, but I'm thinking because of the whiplash, the intensity, and then you couple that maybe with wildfire impacts as well, that would have pretty disastrous consequences for vegetation. I don't know what it would do. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what it would do to the eco zone, but I think that with what we're seeing with debris flows, burn scarred areas when an atmospheric river comes in after a wildfire, it's not good for vegetation as a whole. So I don't know if that helps answer.
Not even talking about the hardscape, all that water going. We'll be talking about that later. Sure.
Yeah. Board member comment?
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. It was awesome. I guess I had a question regarding seasonality of these atmospheric rivers. You might have touched on it, but maybe I missed it. But just in terms of like, will it be kind of, are we projecting that these like atmospheric river events are going to be like really unpredictable between like seasons within the year? And then also coupled with like heat waves and extreme heat, how would that affect us? I know that like I've been in conversations where we talk a lot about like how like humid, really hot and humid weather has been really like plaguing San Diego, especially in like the June gloom time of year, and like nighttime heat waves. Like it's just impossible for it to cool down because it's so humid. So I'm curious how, yeah, I guess it's kind of two questions, but yeah.
Yeah, so atmospheric river seasonality here, there are definitely wintertime phenomenon. So maybe October, November, really in Southern California, we start seeing in December, right?
Yeah.
December, January, February, March sometimes. So that's sort of like when we're observing them here, and that's because of the large scale, like seasonal setup of what's happening at like a global scale. How that relates to kind of heat waves and droughts, I guess like this week and the kind of past couple weeks have been a good example of where you have maybe a larger scale pattern that's settling in. We've got this high pressure that's just like sitting over San Diego right now. It's really hot, where maybe a different year, the larger scale pattern would bring us a bunch of rain in March. So it's that sort of speaks to that like high variability, inability to know from year to year what's going to happen. And yeah, we really don't have a good grasp on the like, yes, this will happen. I can't super speak to drought in California, or I guess drought is the lack of atmospheric rivers. So here you don't have a bunch, you're likely to be put in drought.
Can I ask a follow-up question as well? I'm curious also about how like El Nino like couples with this as well. Is that, are these like two separate like, I guess, cycles that are interacting with each other, and maybe like during an El Nino year there's like more rain like with atmospheric rivers on top of that, or do they kind of work hand in hand? Like how does that work?
Yeah, I would say they work in hand. So El Nino is simply just the warming of the ocean, of the South Pacific Ocean. There's just like a spot that like warms up like crazy. And then that warming sort of triggers this like domino effect, essentially, that sets up these large scale patterns that I was talking about that indicate. So it's like where the high pressure and low pressures are sitting. And so that really tells the storms where they go. And so during El Nino years, we are, I don't want to mess this up. I believe we're in a La Nina this year, and which indicates a drier pattern for Southern California and a wetter pattern for the Pacific Northwest. And then El Nino typically is a wetter pattern for Southern California and a drier pattern for the West. And that's because of the like arrangement of those high and lows that's in response to that warming of the ocean. So that is one mode of predictability that we have in terms of like, yeah, we're going to get more rainstorms this fall. It's not perfect. There are other large scale patterns beyond El Nino, like Matt and Julian oscillate. I could name them, like I could just sit here and say none of the same letters, but it won't make any sense to you. But there's a ton, and they interact in different and interesting ways that are shaping our precipitation patterns.
Cool, thank you.
Board member Morgan first.
Hi, and apologies to colleagues for being out today. I want to thank you for this presentation and this work. It's just really wonderful. And my first question has to do with how is this funded, and how's your security? Will we be able to expect you to continue doing this kind of work on into this misty future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our director, Marty Ralph, is the thing he likes to say is water is a bipartisan issue. The availability of water in California is impacting all sides. And so that currently our funding is not at risk in terms of, you know, atmospheric river reconnaissance and improving precipitation forecasts. A lot of our funding comes from the Department of Water Resources in California, which is, you know, state funding. So very secure there. So I can say that we're doing okay, and
Okay, great.
can expect to continue our research in the future.
All right, excellent. I did have a question about whether all those buoys and cans are reclaimed. Can you capture that? Can you ever get them back? And I see you nodding, so maybe that's enough. My big question is, it sounds like you're saying we can expect in the future a generally hotter, drier world around San Diego with a few days of really cataclysmic flooding. Therefore, we need to be thinking about the hardscape, which we'll go into next. But is that your general sense?
Yeah, I would say that's a good summary.
All right. And the last thing is, have these atmospheric rivers always been with us?
Yes, yeah. As long as I guess what I've been liking to say lately is as long as the continents have been in the configuration that they've been in, the atmospheric rivers have always been there. We've just been able to identify them since satellites, since we started having satellite imagery. So they were first identified in the early 80s by a couple scientists using satellite imagery, and then the term was officially coined, atmospheric river, maybe the early 90s. So they've been here for a while.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
So there's rain or precipitation that comes from atmospheric rivers, and there's some that comes from non. Can you, like an atmospheric river, when and how does it dissipate? Does it only affect the coastal zones, or could like mid-United States also get an atmospheric river? Yeah, what's the difference in how both of them come to be, like whether they're non-atmospheric river?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's actually one of my small subsets of expertise. So okay. So atmospheric rivers hitting the coast, typically formed over the oceans, and then they'll move their way in. So we get a lot of the ones actually that hit Southern California. They rain, maybe they rain out a bit, and then some of that moisture doesn't necessarily always rain out and continues inland. Actually, I have a paper that I just published recently that shows that up to 78% of snow water equivalent, so snow accumulation in Western Colorado, is associated with atmospheric rivers. So they don't always just rain out, they do continue on. Maybe they don't always keep the shape that we know of, like that river shape, but the moisture from the atmospheric river is certainly contributing to precipitation in interior locations. Now, why or how that works, we're still trying to figure that out. But yeah.
So if there's rain or precipitation from non-atmospheric rivers, is that just evaporation? And then like, how does that come to be?
I would say those are more our like convective storms. So like monsoon, like the monsoon season here. So you get those big clouds that build up in the summer, in the late summer months, and then you'll get some rainfall that happens. So that's like a thunderstorm. That would be our other type of rain in San Diego.
And how does that water get in those clouds? From the ground?
Yeah, from oceans, or evaporation into the clouds. So
okay. So if you see like a rain cloud, that's more the non-atmospheric river.
Yeah, like
source.
if you see like clear conditions, like no clouds, and then you look over, it's usually east south, and you'll see these big puffy clouds grow and then get rain out.
Interesting.
That's that convection.
Did you also want to mention the scale that CW3 developed too?
Yes. Okay.
Just to help understand, also the intensity of these storms.
Yeah, I didn't put that in my presentation. So we have developed, CW3 has developed atmospheric river scale. That's sort of like the hurricane scale. So it goes from 1 to 5 to indicate on the lower end, one is more like a benefits, low risk of hazards. And then on the other end of 5 would say like extremely hazardous, like widespread flooding, maybe landslides, other activity. And the way that works is saying how much water vapor is in the atmospheric river. So more water vapor typically means more availability for precipitation. And then how long that water vapor is sustained over one place in time. So usually those like longer atmospheric rivers means more rain, longer duration rain. So longer, more intense atmospheric rivers typically mean more.
That brings up kind of what my question was, and I'll get to you, which was, so I always hear in planning about like 100-year storms, 10-year storms. I mean, it seems like we're having 100-year storms every couple of years based on what's happening. Can you put that in perspective of sort of what's going on? Is there a way to quantify or equate those?
We often will take, I didn't for these, couple storms that we looked at today, like the January one and the February one. So that like 1 in 100-year storm is relating to how much rain fell in a period of time. And so it's, if we had 10 inches of rain in under 24 hours, yeah, maybe that only happens once every 100 years. And so how that's built essentially is using past data, right? So historical data. And so if the planet is warming, the precipitation patterns are changing, and we're not including that data in the like 1 in 100-year storms, that's how you're sort of getting those like multiple 1 in 100-year storms every couple of years now, rather than 1 in 5-year storms.
Yeah, and I think that's more a question for the city and public utilities, is how they're sort of planning for that. But I think that was interesting. Somebody quoted to me at a meeting last night that Hawaii and Kihei received 2.5 feet in 24 hours. I don't know the science behind it, but there definitely was flooding and big sinkholes and closures and a big impact to the residents and visitors of that area.
Yeah.
So those were my comments and questions, but thank you about El Nino, because that was one of my questions. I always heard about El Nino and La Nina, and I feel like I only started hearing about atmospheric rivers a couple years ago. But with that,
thanks. Thank you very much. This is super interesting. All kinds of great questions. I have 2. One is, I feel like I definitely forget that we have any control over our emissions and climate change, and we do have a lot of control theoretically. Do any of the models that you use, are they related to the projections for how much warming happens? Is there any kind of quantifiable relationship between what we should expect based on what actions we take now and in the coming decades?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I rushed through that. Yeah, the slide back would be great. Yeah, this one's.
I need to cast that again, sorry.
Okay.
I forgot.
And they recently changed how I guess it used to be like RCP. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. I don't even know what it stands for anymore, but it used to be RCP, now it's SSP.
Okay.
And these numbers. And so I used to know for sure like what each one was. But this SSP 245 is like, today we start taking large scale action to reduce carbon emissions. Like this is widespread global change starts now. And so that's like the projection for that. And then the SSP 370 is my understanding is like, we wait a little bit and then maybe we start to do some action. And then SSP 585 is business as usual, fossil fuels dominating how we get energy. So obviously SSP 585 is kind of the worst. You're seeing the highest increase in these frequency, higher increase in those extremes, and these results are based on the middle option there. Okay. So it's sort of like the middle of the road. Like eventually we'll get to some changes. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, and on the last one that you showed, it seems like, which we've heard in a lot of different ways, I feel like a lot of the change is already baked in. So even the lower end model with us acting tomorrow, it still, increases by 33%
Yeah,
already. Yeah.
yeah, we've already passed.
Yeah.
Some pretty significant thresholds in terms of warming, so.
Well. But do you want to say?
No, I was just say, go ahead, and then I want to do the call for public comment and probably move on.
Isn't it only really dangerous because of the infrequency and like the quality of the ground and that it can't see, so that leads to the flooding? I thought that was what causes like the flooding, is that it can't like infiltrate into the ground like it might in like the Midwest. And it's just like dry, hard ground, just runs off and causes flooding. And so, I don't know, I guess I was just a hopeful, probably not true thought, is if there was so much more increase in frequency that maybe the damages would eventually not be so bad, because it could, our ground could actually soak it in. You know what I'm saying? Isn't that
Yeah.
why there's floods?
There's definitely evidence like more urban built environments.
Yeah.
Have trouble with flooding because the water can't go into the ground.
Okay.
And then the infrastructure in place. I'm not a hydrologist. I am not a urban hydrologist, that's for sure. But yeah, so I've heard of strategies that could be implemented to kind of reduce that problem.
Yeah,
But I really can't say much more than that.
just maybe.
For a whole lot of
That's better.
non-humans, this is going to change the ecology of the habitats and it change the species, the plants that are here, and so therefore change the nesting opportunities and all that kind of stuff. It could be very big changes. And this kind of soil that you get in a place that doesn't get a lot of rain and then gets big rains is not ready to soak up soil very
Right.
well, or soak up rain very well. So a lot of it rolls off of desert kind of soil, no matter what, whether it's hardscape or.
I wonder if you need like more periods of like beneficial rain more consistently versus
That's what I'm saying, so if it gets up high enough, maybe.
but that's not beneficial rain. It's more of the extreme, the intense rain that can't get soaked up because there's too much of it
All at one time.
all at one time, and then followed by extended periods of drought.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
We'll take a pause if board members can think of any final questions and just do a call. Is there any public comment? If you have public comment, please raise your hand or press *9. Okay, seeing no public comment, any additional questions or comments from the board?
Just wondering if, if you could send us some of the papers and reports you mentioned earlier, just in case any folks want to do more of a deep dive.
Yeah, maybe Ian can help coordinate that. And I also know that some of the results I showed are from a county like resilience report type that Julie Kalansky is helping with, and it's in its draft phase, but we can definitely share that when it's published.
Great.
And come back.
Thanks for all your work.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting and thought-provoking. Okay. We will go ahead and move on to our next informational item, the Phase 1 Los Penasquitos Lagoon Restoration Project. I think we might have a few folks online for this one. If you could introduce yourselves for this program, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna Menke. I'm a Deputy Director with the City of San Diego Stormwater Department, and I'll let Ronak introduce herself. She'll also be presenting with me.
Good afternoon, Renat Rakani, Senior Engineer with the Engineering Capital Projects Department, overseeing this project for the Stormwater Department.
All right, thanks, Ronak. So we're here today to present an overview of the Phase 1 Los Penasquitos Lagoon Restoration Project. And if you can advance to the next slide, Ronak, this is just a quick overview of our agenda. I'll give a brief background on the project, and then I'll turn it over to Ronak to discuss the project goals and components, the work that we've completed to date, and our planned activities for the future, a project schedule, and then questions and discussions. But feel free to pause us at any point on any slide to ask questions as we proceed. A bit about the project impetus. So this is actually a regulatory required project. In the Los Penasquitos Lagoon, we have what's called a total maximum daily load for sediment. So that is a regulation issued to us by our Regional Water Quality Control Board that basically dictates that the lagoon is impaired because of sediment inputs over, a very long period of history, which has essentially caused the lagoon to turn over from what was historically a salt marsh habitat to its current form, which is much more of a freshwater habitat. So again, that's been caused by sediment input from development in the upper watershed, freshwater inputs from the watershed as well. And so the requirement of this total maximum daily load is that we reduce our sediment inputs into the lagoon. And then at the end of the TMDL, which the sunset date is what it's called, of 2035, we are required to have restored up to 84 acres of salt marsh habitat in the lagoon by that time. So this is a joint project. There are numerous parties named as responsible parties in the TMDL. So it's the City of San Diego, the County of San Diego, City of Poway, City of Del Mar, and Caltrans. We're all project participants. And then we're also implementing this project in partnership with the Los Penasquitos Lagoon Foundation and California State Parks. I have a slide and a couple slides that'll show this, but most of the project footprint is located in the state preserve. So California State Parks owns the lagoon for the most part, and then the Los Penasquitos Lagoon Foundation, which is a nonprofit, are essentially stewards of the lagoon. So the California State Parks delegates a lot of that management authority to the Lagoon Foundation. So we're doing this project in partnership with both of them. Sort of to that end, the Los Penasquitos Lagoon Foundation updated their enhancement plan in 2018, and they included this project as a priority in that updated enhancement plan. So when they did their programmatic EIR, we've been able to tier off of that because it was included in that planning document. So as I mentioned, the compliance targets for the project, we have to reduce our sediment inputs into the lagoon, but ultimately what we really have to do is restore that lagoon up to 84 acres, which is why we're actively undertaking this project. So the project components include salt marsh restoration, enhancement of the riparian corridor, and then some floodway improvements as well. You advance the slide. Thank you. So this is just a few visuals so you can sort of see, excuse me, the historical vegetation communities in the marsh, late 1800s into 1973, the majority, as I was saying, was salt marsh. The 1970s is when the development in the watershed really started ramping up, and so that resulted in all of that sediment from the development and all the freshwater inputs just sort of coming down the watershed into the lagoon, sort of changed the lagoon topography, which meant that all of the freshwater flows that were coming from upward in the watershed couldn't be sort of funneled out to the Pacific Ocean at the lagoon mouth very efficiently. So the freshwater was just sitting on the lagoon for longer, and then the saltwater from the ocean couldn't make its way back into the lagoon. So that's what sort of caused this turnover from salt marsh to freshwater marsh. So you can sort of see a more updated photograph shows that degradation of where there historically was salt marsh. It's much more fragmented. And that was sort of the impetus for the TMDL and the requirement to restore that. So the overall restoration is split into two phases, sort of geographically. The Los Penasquitos Lagoon, if any of you are familiar, sort of it's bisected by the railroad. So phase one is located southwest of the railroad berm, and then phase two is that north portion. So phase one is what we're here to present today, and phase two will sort of be informed by the lessons learned of phase one. So we won't begin designing construction of phase two until we complete phase one and sort of do that adaptive management and monitoring. Next slide, please. So this is the slide I was talking about, just sort of an overview of the ownership boundaries within the project. So most of it, as I said, is owned by California State Parks. It's a state preserve. There's a sort of smaller chunk that's owned by the Coastal Conservancy, and then City of San Diego owns some of it, and then some private ownership as well. And you can sort of see it situated in that larger Sorrento Valley business community. So there's a lot of active and interested stakeholders involved in this project. We've done a lot of outreach to, the community, property owners, business owners, the regulatory agencies. We formed a technical advisory committee that's sort of comprised of a lot of experts in this type of restoration they've been advising us on project design. So it's definitely a multidisciplinary project with a lot of interested stakeholders, and it's necessitated a lot of outreach. So I think with that, I think this is my last slide, so I'll turn it over to Ronak from here if no one has any questions for me, and I'll be available at the end of the presentation as well.
Thanks, Brianna. So I just want to cover some of the benefits to the community that the project's going to provide. So the project will be restoring the open space that contains rare and sensitive habitats that are native to the lagoon. And it'll also be providing protection for the businesses and the roadways within the Sorrento Valley area that Brianna was just talking about. If you're familiar with that area, you know that area does see a lot of frequent flooding events, and a lot of mud does accumulate within the roadways following those frequent rain events. We'll also be enhancing the marsh trail that goes through the lagoon. I know that's a really important aspect for the public, as well as everyone around the county who does enjoy the trail there. We'll be providing some enhancements to the existing trail. The project will also be implementing stormwater outfalls, and these outfalls will help to reduce trash and debris that does collect. And it'll also be eliminating areas of ponded water, which will address the vector control issue that's mentioned in the TMDL, as well as, it'll be addressing the mosquito breeding habitat issue that's addressed in the TMDL.
Excuse me, if we could go ahead and take a pause. We've had two board members step out. We need to resume a quorum before we continue the meeting.
Some people right now.
Yeah.
And emails too.
Yeah,
We're not going to
got
be dealing each other business, but we have urgencies.
Yeah, because I got emails. I didn't want to email you if Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and resume the meeting.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so some of the project components are salt marsh restoration. As Brianna mentioned, we'll be restoring about 45 to 55 acres of salt marsh. And we'll be doing that by using focus grading as well as channel benching. The project will include riparian corridor enhancement through the removal of invasive vegetation within the degraded salt marsh and revegetating those areas with native species. The project has a sediment management component in which the project proposes floodplain enhancements to manage sediment that's historically been entering the lagoon. The project will also include nuisance freshwater management. So the project will include connection of existing channels with historic tidal channels, and that's going to improve storm flow and dry weather flow conveyance, as well as reducing freshwater ponding and retention within the marsh. The project will reduce flooding levels, so it includes improvements to stormwater conveyance within Sereno Valley through channel and floodplain enhancements, as well as the installation of floodgates to restrict backflow of floodwaters. So that'll help increase those flooding levels within the more frequent storms. And finally, the public access enhancement will be seen through updates to the marsh trail, as I mentioned previously. Some of the key goals for the restoration aspect of the project. We will be restoring about 55 acres, and that's going towards our goal of 84 acres of salt marsh habitat by 2035 per the TMDL. We'll be doing that through removal of existing non-native ryegrass and replacing that with salt marsh vegetation. And you can kind of see the proposed vegetation communities in the figure here. In addition, the project does consider future sea level rise, which brings me to this slide. So the design did include adaptive management for future sea level rise. Our consultant did create 2 hydrodynamic models for the consideration of sea level rise. One was a 0.8-foot increase in 2035 and a 3.6-foot increase in the year 2100. And these modeling results are used to provide transition zones that allow for restored areas to adapt to future sea level rise. And these transition zones will allow expanded tidal wetlands while not impacting the less valuable subtidal habitat for the TMDL. This is what you can expect the vegetation community to look like in the year 2035 with that 0.8-foot increase. You can kind of see some shallow subtidal inundation within the channels, and those are the areas in blue, as well as the intertidal mud flats, which are the areas in brown. And if I go to the next slide, you can see that those brown and blue areas have significantly increased and moved towards the lagoon. And you can see that the channels that were non-tidal in 2035 are expected to be conveying tidal flows by 2100 based on the sea level rise modeling. Mitigation is a big component of the project, so we do have to mitigate for our permanent as well as temporary impacts. Our permanent impacts include 2 permanent access roads, the 3 floodplain enhancements for sediment management that we're including, the 4 storm drain improvement locations where we're including outfalls, Carroll Canyon Creek, the avoidance of the listed species occupied habitat, and wetlands loss offset by reestablishment of vegetation. Some of the temporary impacts are the restoration grading areas or grading that's adjacent to the floodplain enhancements. The tidal channel deepening is considered a temporary impact as well, including some of the staging and stockpile areas that we'll have during construction, as well as the adaptive management roads, which are temporary and will be removed at the conclusion of the adaptive management period. It's also important to note that the project is self-mitigating. Phase 1 is self-mitigating. And if we do generate any additional credits for the mitigation on phase 1, those credits will be applied to offset the impacts that we may see when we begin construction on phase 2. Going to the sediment management component of the project, the key goals here are to remove coarse sediment before it enters the lagoon, before it impacts the riparian and lagoon habitats. And sediment management will also allow us to address sediment, trash, and vector issues at the storm drains near the outfalls and inlets. So the riparian corridor enhancements will allow us to remove invasive plants and improve and preserve the key wildlife corridors, specifically for the light-footed ridgeway rail. So we work with the resource agencies to reduce the width of the adjacent floodplain enhancements, and that's kind of the concrete block area you see here. And this will allow us to ensure that the movement corridor for the ridgeway rail was preserved at a 95-foot minimum. For the nuisance freshwater management component of the project will be conveying nuisance flows of freshwater off of the marsh plain and into tidal channels by using low flow diversion structures. So we'll be diverting those away from the salt marsh habitat. And the project will also reduce the retention time of storm runoff to levels that support salt marsh habitat and support salt marsh health, as well as higher levels of salinity. The project is going to reduce flooding levels for more frequent storms. So a 10-year storm event is where really you're going to see this benefit. So this is going to provide protection for businesses and roadways within the Serrano Valley area, especially within the business park. And they're going to see this benefit for the flooding and mud flows that they do frequently see following rain events. So we really won't be able to see a benefit beyond a 10-year storm just because this area is located within the 100-year floodplain. And for us to see a benefit for any storm event beyond a 10-year storm, we'd have to essentially lift this entire area out of the floodplain. Some of the public enhancements that will be included in the project are improvements that are very similar to the Broken Hill Trail in Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve, if you are familiar with that trail. The design is being coordinated with the Los Penasquitos Lagoon Foundation project for the upslope realignment of the Marsh Trail's western segment. And we are working with California State Parks to enhance the Marsh Trail and preserve its rustic nature. So we'll be making it a bit wider, adding some wayfinding signage, and also adding some fencing in some areas. For the project's maintenance, we do get a lot of questions in terms of like, okay, who's going to maintain this? How are you going to maintain this? The project does include a 5-year period of an adaptive management period. And this will help us inform the phase 2 design and maintenance needs. So City is working with California State Parks on an access agreement for construction and maintenance. And this will allow the city and state parks to really work together on ensuring that the improvements that were constructed are being maintained and reported back to the regulatory agencies as required by the TMTO. Some of the work that's been completed to date, the project team did complete the habitat mitigation and monitoring plan back in November 2024. The 100% PS&E was completed in December of 2023. The project did require a site development permit, and that was completed recently in October 2025. In terms of the environmental permitting, the CEQA addendum was adopted by City Council in March 2025. And this was an addendum to the EIR, the programmatic EIR that was completed through the Los Penasquitos Lagoon Enhancement Plan. The project did receive the streambed alteration agreement from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in February of 2026. It's a recent development. There are still a lot of ongoing permitting activities, and these are in relation to the coastal development permit that is required from the California Coastal Commission. We'll also need a 404 permit, individual permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and a 401 water quality certification from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. A bit about the schedule. So the permits and final design completion, we are targeting the fourth quarter of 2027. And construction related activities for phase 1 are dependent on securing funds for construction. The plant procurement contract, we do need a plant procurement contract before we actually start construction. We'll need to harvest plants that are located on site currently, keep them off site until they've been established, and then hand them off to the contractor to replant them on site. And that contract is anticipated to start at the beginning of the third quarter of 2028. Construction contract, we hope to execute that at the beginning of the third quarter of 2029. Construction will take place in phases, so we'll have phase 1A, 1B, and 1C, and it'll go approximately from 2029 to 2033. It's about a 4-year duration. And as those sub-phases are completed, they will be followed by the adaptive management period, which is a 5-year period that includes maintenance and monitoring. And that concludes the information I have for the project. We're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maybe on this one, just to get it, dispose of it, is there any public comment? If you are online and have any public comment, please raise your hand or press *9. And no public comment in the room? Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and go to board member comments. Okay, comments or questions?
Thanks. Super interesting. And it was only until the very end that I realized that none of this has happened yet. So that's I'm excited about it. I guess my question is, you mentioned at the beginning, and I don't know the Regional Water Quality Control Board's discussion and reason for this at the beginning very well, but you mentioned it was about the need for saltwater tidal wetland and sediment control. And it seems like a lot of the floodwater component to it, I know I've read the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's response to the city about this project, and they were concerned that a lot of the flood benefit wasn't really talked about or is ancillary to it. So I guess my question is, the nuisance freshwater habitats that you're talking about and are going to change, how does that relate to the first map that you had up here showed that the Los Penasquitos had a big substantial portion of freshwater marsh and right in or half in the area that phase one is looking at. There should be a lot of freshwater marsh here if we're looking at the late 1800s in terms of restoration goals. And shouldn't it be a substantial component of where this phase one is currently looking at? What is the goal for the freshwater wetland piece in terms of the restoration plan?
Sure. So the late 1800s was kind of just a reference to show change over time. The TMDL, I forget what the term is, but it's essentially a baseline year. They want us to restore to, I believe it's 1976 conditions. So that is the TMDL requirement, that we restore to the conditions more or less in the middle slide. So that's why the requirement is for salt marsh restoration instead of a freshwater. It's mostly freshwater now, as you can see in the 2013 slide. And again, that turnover is just because of that development in the upper watershed, sort of changing the topography of the lagoon and causing that freshwater to just sit for a lot longer period of time, preventing the salt water from getting back into those back portions of the lagoon. So it's much more freshwater now than saltwater, but historically, our required kind of baseline condition is this 1970-ish condition.
And I'll also add that although there are benefits for flood reduction within the project, essentially the project is not a flood control project. That is not a component of the TMDL, and that's why most of the flood control features are being paid for completely by the city of San Diego and not by the co-permittees.
Okay. One other question just about some of the habitat details. To me, I don't have enough experience to understand the mitigation and impact analysis slides that you have here, and I apologize, but is there a way or is there a table where, because of the habitat that was there in the restoration goal of the 1970s, because you're impacting some of it during the project and some of it was already impacted, and you're moving some freshwater wetland habitat to saltwater marsh habitat, is there a before and after, like now versus 2023, 2033 table that shows how the habitats change through the course of this project? Before and after, not just what's created or what's enhanced.
Are you referring to an image or a table?
I think a table would be easier for me to understand. And I just don't have that already.
Probably get that for you. We could get that information. So just to clarify, you want information on existing habitat communities versus proposed, or what we anticipate to be there in 2035.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you can put the mitigation in there as a component to it, but existing versus proposed total wetland or total habitats for each of these would be super useful to know what's being created ultimately versus what's just being changed or moved around.
Yeah, we can provide that.
Thank you.
I'd be curious, as you're creating that table, to see what are the permanent and temporary impacts and what are your mitigation ratios by habitat type. I'm sure that's in the addendum, but if you could help us point it to it as you're pulling it together, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
My question's real quick. When you're could you go back to slide 4
and then maybe point on this map,
where is the area that you are saying there would be the 10-year storm?
is it sort of in the industrial park areas to the south?
Yes, exactly. So within the business park, kind of towards the edge of essentially the project limits. That's really where you would see the benefit in the 10-year storm, is within the business park in Sereno Valley near Roselle and Flake Cove.
Okay, thank you.
We have you, or at least some of your colleagues, coming back from stormwater in May, and perhaps when they come back, we can get in perspective. What is a 10-year storm? What is a 100-year storm, especially in relationship to the presentation that we just heard?
with more significant rain events occurring followed by periods of dryness. So that's my question slash comment. But opening up to the rest of the board members as well. Board Member Harris?
Yes, because the images show quite a bit of private landowners. What's the nature of the adjoining landowners? Primarily residential? Are there others? And how are you working with them?
I think it's majority commercial, unless,
Right.
is that right, Rona? Yeah, so it's mostly commercial, light industrial. There's a few undeveloped parcels actually, I think, in the lagoon itself. Not totally sure how that happened. But anyway, so as I mentioned, we've had a very robust outreach process where we've contacted all of those parcel owners, and we've had information sessions, and they're part of project updates. Um, some of them, depending on where they're located, it really is just for informational purposes. I think some of them will actually need some sort of temporary easements or other types of agreements for the project, but they've all been extremely supportive, mostly for the reasons that Ronak was detailing. The ancillary flood benefits are just going to be very impactful for them. If any of you know this area, it does flood often. So I think they're all anxious to see this project proceed, and it's been positive interactions with them.
And I have another question.
Okay.
Yes, probably a very basic one, but what are the main drivers of this ongoing sedimentation, and how is the project mitigating that on an ongoing basis?
Ongoing sedimentation. So this TMDL was issued in 2012. And so since the issuance of the TMDL, all of those jurisdictions that I mentioned that are responsible parties have been charged with reducing sediment flows leaving their jurisdiction. So in terms of new sediment that's entering the lagoon, I think there's been a much more robust effort by those responsible parties to sort of reduce the amount of sediment that's coming from our jurisdictions and entering the lagoon. I think what this project is really aiming to address is all of that historical sediment input that's just there now and has resulted in the current lagoon conditions. To that end, though, there are sediment management components of the project because there is still sediment coming from up in the watershed. It just comes from the creek sometimes with that hydro mod, and just, when you have a lot of rain and sediment is released, there's a lot of canyons in that area. Outfalls are located high in the canyons. That causes additional sediment sometimes. So there are those sediment management basins that are part of this project and part of what will be the ongoing maintenance of the project to maintain those sediment basins so there's not additional sediment inputs into the lagoon, in addition to all of those jurisdictional watershed efforts that all of those other cities and City of San Diego, what we're doing to reduce the amount of sediment coming from our jurisdictions.
Are those efforts largely successful?
There's definitely been reductions since the TMDL was issued in 2012. So we're all part of watershed work groups. We've been required to develop what are called water quality improvement plans. Every jurisdiction that has land area in a given watershed, and those detail all of the implementation strategies that our agencies are going to undertake to address these high priority water quality conditions. And then we report on those annually every year. Those are posted to Project Clean Water, and those sort of detail how our sediment loads are reflective of those efforts. So it'll have progress on our strategies and then the actual monitoring results. So we go out and we have to, do our monitoring, our water quality sampling, measure the sediment and all of that. So I can definitely share where all of those are saved, and you can sort of see those trends of, we had those water quality improvement plans approved. It was before my time, I think 2015. But you can sort of see in those annual reports, like what our sediment loading has looked like over the years, in addition to the strategies that we've implemented in each of our agencies. So I can definitely share those with the board.
Yes, like you were talking about a table earlier, it'd be great to have some sort of comprehensive table to see, the different sources, what the trends have been, I guess, in percentage reductions and then projections with this, because you obviously want to make certain that this is going to be successful.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Okay,
Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing about those follow-up items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
just because it came in on the last item, I want to read into the record briefly. We did get a comment from Ann Faggy in the chat on the atmospheric rivers. About the atmospheric rivers incidents, there are many ties to trees, stormwater retention, and water supply to young and mature trees, as most of you we are aware of. So, thank you. All right, with that, we are concluding our informational items and moving on to our action items. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can figure out how to do it. Been doing this for 5 years. Okay, so the next item is coordination for our next meeting, which is the community meeting. And so Julia had emailed me over what are the things that we need to decide at this meeting in order to proceed with the special meeting in April at an offsite. And so I put it in a table based on some feedback and conversation with board member Gong on what we can do to help facilitate this meeting. We only have, I think, 17 minutes because if you have to leave at 3, then we have to conclude the meeting by that. That said, I don't think this is very complicated, and I'll say from my perspective, having a meeting in the community where we give a presentation of what we are and receive some feedback is sort of a win and a victory, especially since it's our first meeting. So I think this is a fairly simple and achievable process. So first is we need to have a preferred and alternate location, and then a preferred and alternate date. In the table here are our recommendations, which is the preferred location at the Valencia Park Malcolm X Library. We actually have 2 potential alternate locations. Given that they're not city facilities, we thought it'd be appropriate to include 2 in case they're logistical or cost other things, in case the first one does not work. In our work program, this is plugged in on April 23rd. That's actually the 4th Thursday, I think, because that was one of the meetings that conflicted with the Environment Committee on April 16th. Given that we are considering having this and want to have it as a meeting that members of the public could come to, my recommendation is that we have the start time be at 6 p.m. And have the 23rd and the 16th, which would have been the 3rd Thursday, be the alternate date. So are there any comments on the locations or either of the dates or any known conflicts with the dates? Because as we're experiencing today, we do need to have at least 6 members able to attend.
Is that shareable? Sorry. Like, if we want to click on it, I just having some trouble
Expanding it.
expanding it.
Like making it larger?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm getting old. Seriously. Also, I mean,
Really
if I
bad.
slept more, that also would help.
I'll just make a comment that both of the alternate locations that we chose are within the vicinity of like the library. It's like City Heights, Joyce Creek watershed area to align with our guest presentation.
Just, how accessible the primary location is and proximity to transportation.
I know for a fact that the Jacob Center is right off the Orange Line. I'm not too sure about the libraries. I want to say that the library might be off of like the El Cajon bus line. And then the Jackie Robinson YMCA, I'm not too sure about. I've only accessed that one by car. But I can look.
Those dates work for me.
Great, thank you.
April, I think 16th would work better for me.
Okay.
Jackie Robinson is right off the orange line as well. They're actually, I think they're down the street from each other, the Jacob Center. And
Yeah, they were all in,
YMCA.
and I think we were all on kind of a coordinator schedule. I'll say the 16th actually works a little bit better for me, but I didn't want to change it, but so we could flip them or not.
I help.
Could we
Coach Little
change
League.
the location to, could we change the primary location to Jackie Robinson? So that there's child watch.
Oh, good
And I
one.
can. I think there is child watch there.
For quorum purposes, I'm unable to attend the April 16th. I will be recovering and highly sedated.
I mean, it could make for a very interesting contribution on your end.
I'll have to be there.
Yeah, so
Um,
all three locations are off the orange line. They're all within like 5 minutes of each other, actually.
I mean, I'm fine with moving that to primary or examining that. I just don't know if there's any costs, and I assume the city does not have a large budget for this meeting or any budget for this meeting.
Oh, yeah, that.
It's
that
just a
bit-
preference. If there's a budget, then we could totally stick with the library, but if Jackie Robinson is free, I think that would be.
I don't
nice.
know if would they allow like drop-ins like that? Cause I would imagine that the
I'm
sponsor,
talking about for myself, but if someo's a member of the Y, they could.
is
They
that,
might be
so if
able
you're a
to-
member already, you can just,
Yeah,
okay,
because Monday through Thursday, it's 4 to 8. It
okay.
would just make it easier for me to not have to pay a babysitter.
Oh, sure. Ignorance. I just didn't know
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
easy or not easy it was to.
Okay.
Drop your kid off.
but I mean, I can find an alternative, so I'm good for either day. It just would be easier if it's a Jackie Robinson.
Okay.
I'll make it work.
And then we do have one more member not here as well. So I guess maybe so we can move on to the agenda. Pending ability to get quorum and confirmation of location. Are there any concerns with these dates or locations?
Just the 16th. 23rd is definite.
Yeah, I noted that.
Perfect.
Okay. And then so here is the proposed agenda. The request is to have a confirmed agenda run of show for the meeting. And so what I try to do with this is break it into more of a facilitated meeting, but I included, okay, what are all of our agenda items that we have to still accomplish? Because it's still a Brown Act meeting. So included in sort of the welcome and level set, I had opening remarks, an intro and thanking community for attending, and then sort of agenda items 1 through 5, which is our administrative type things that we typically go through fairly quickly. I'll go through the whole thing and then we can have comments. And then an informational item, which is normally our agenda item number 8. So we skip a little bit, but I think it's important to have it here, which is an overview of the Resiliency Advisory Board. Andrew's preparing it. I plugged it in here as him to give it. We could discuss that. Because I kind of volunteered him to do it. But really kind of an overview of what our structure is. And what we have, that we would be taking public comment, if any, on this informational item. As part of that, I was thinking maybe we have an ask to people in the public comment is if they can help provide and answer questions. Sort of what is a word or something that describes your neighborhood's strengths or weaknesses as it relates to really resiliency, because we kind of want a listening session. And we're gonna have to do public comment anyways. So I was thinking that it'd be natural to follow a non-agenda public comment with that. And then have any comment given there for that. Then we would have our community, either action item or information item, presentation from Groundworks. Board Member Gong, is there anything else you want to share about that?
No, I'll just be reaching out to them. I guess the date will also be pending on their availability as well. So I will propose those 2 dates for them to see if that works.
Okay, great. And then we would conclude with thanking the attendees. And then our final items, which is unfinished business, which we usually don't have any. And then propose future agenda items and adjournment. I think sort of the ask to everybody probably following this meeting would be if there's any proposed outreach to community members, anybody we want to make sure that we add and include on the distribution list for this. And then some logistical things that I probably want to speak more with Julia, summer cost, or at least low cost, is making sure that we have multilingual access, somebody there for that. Make sure we have speaker cards, which we have enough. And then if there's any sort of budget for printing a poster board, a flip chart during the public comment for somebody, even if it's to take down comments. I mean, if we had budget to do like a map of the area and have just sticky notes and have people write on them with any comments, that could be helpful, fairly low cost ways to get public comments. So opening up to comments, questions.
Just a small thing to make sure that we mention that we are still looking to fill board seats.
Particularly in that district that we're going to, yeah.
And logistics include very, very easy ways for people to access that. Even set up an iPad over there. Here. Nominate yourself.
A QR code.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe because we have the flyer, maybe we can even have some of those. Because things come up, but if we have a full committee board, it'd be easier to reach quorum.
Sorry, go back to the childcare thing. Did the Jacob Center provide childcare?
We didn't look into that. I'm not sure.
And I'm also just thinking for members of the public.
No, for
Obviously, in addition to board members, if there's that service available.
That'd be great, yeah.
Because that could also be something, if verified, could be advertised on the flyer too.
Yeah.
And then was there going to be a hybrid option for this, or is it strictly in person? What makes the most sense?
I think our intent was to have it be a hybrid option,
Okay,
but the city is going to need to verify that that's okay.
right.
That was one of the things I wanted to verify on locations.
Like if there's like a capability, AV capability like this.
Yeah.
Connectivity. Yeah, I was just curious. I wasn't sure.
This is still predating the new guidance from city, not city clerk, but on the new thing, but the hybrid option like this. So it would still be, if a board member was attending hybrid, they'd have to read the statement.
Right.
As we learned today, we need to have an in-person quorum. Board Member Harris, did you have a question before we go? I see Erica has her hand up.
Erica, would you like to go first?
Yeah, no, nothing urgent about this. I am okay with both of those dates and locations. They're on the orange line, so I can make that work. I did want to offer, I have a large supply of sticky notes and markers that I'd be glad to donate to the cause. If you can get a white, flip chart or whatever. I do think that the idea of asking people to say something about their neighborhood is a great one. I really appreciate that kind of an engagement suggestion. It's really, really useful. And I also think that having some kind of special little cards for people to apply, to express interest in the seat and joining the board is also really is a good idea.
Okay.
I would suggest including on the agenda, even if you'll go over what we're going to do next during the intro, but to wrap up with an item being very clear how we're going to take this information, how it's going to be used to inform our recommendations, and have some kind of output that collects that information so that folks know that we have synthesized it and we are considering it very seriously.
Do you mean not what the Resiliency Advisory Board has for their future meetings, but the information that people put on, say during at this meeting and put on the sticky notes that what we're gonna do with that?
Because they quite a few folks, I assume, will have experience where they are they are heard but not actually listened to and agreed with. So to be clear, this is not going to be a waste of their time. And you can let them know that they'll have opportunities to engage in public comment throughout the rest of our RAB year. But making that an explicit part of the agenda and follow through, make sure we follow through.
Okay, great. And then there is no members of the public, but just a quick call. Is there any public comment? It doesn't look like there's any online anymore. Is there any public comment? Okay. So any additional comments, questions? I think certain details can all be revised, and they'll need to be coordination with Julia and the city team. But I think it would be appropriate to have a motion if conceptually this looks good for a plan to move forward.
Can I keep it a little vague? Say, I make a motion to approve the agenda as drafted and modified during this March board meeting, and to consider board preferences around time, date, and the location proposed. Or do we need to be more specific?
I think we need to be more specific on the date and location.
Cool.
We did want the primary and backup date and the primary and backup
be safe.
location.
So is this still what we're looking at? The preferred location is Valencia Park still?
We could change that to be the YMCA. That's the desire of the committee. Or unfortunately, I don't think we know enough about the Jacobs Center other than it's kind of in the vicinity, and
Looks like childcare there goes till 6 p.m. Program operates, this is according to Google.
Yeah, I'm in favor of having the YMCA as our primary location, and if it's not feasible, then falling back on the library and then just eliminating Jacob Center, because that just seems a little
Yeah, 6 p.m. doesn't help. You can only come for 1 hour.
Okay.
Not even. 6 p.m.
Yeah.
starts at 6 p.m., not 5. Yeah, sorry.
And I think part of the rationale for 6 is gives the people a little bit more time to get around, get down there from different locations.
Especially if it's 8:05, right?
Yeah.
And April 23rd is our preferred date because is a maybe and Cynthia is a no on the 23rd. Is that?
23rd, I'm a no.
Oh,
16.
you're a no.
Yeah, 16th is preferred for me. Works better for board member Clampett.
Mine's the reverse.
And yours is the reverse. Sorry, I
Yeah.
said it wrong, but I'm just saying. Okay,
So we're short.
one no
Um,
matter what.
I mean, maybe what we could say for the motion is keep it in this order, pending coordination with Grace as well. Because I think if she's able to send them together, maybe we flip it that way. Sure.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
that's good.
I'm doing math.
I don't know how to communicate this motion.
I can make the motion to approve the agenda as drafted and revised at the March meeting with the primary preferred location as the Jackie Robinson YMCA with an alternate location of the Valencia Park Malcolm X Library, as well as the preferred date of April 23rd and alternate date of April 16 pending board member Jones and groundworks availability.
Second.
Okay.
Well done.
Yeah.
You think that's a specific enough motion?
That will work, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on the motion?
No comments, just to make sure I understand the math is mathing that we can only afford to lose one board member with our current configuration.
Two,
We can just two.
we can lose
We can
two.
lose two.
Grace is just not here.
There is 8 of us.
Does Erica not count? Erica doesn't count today then technically. As far as
Erica does
okay.
not count for quorum purposes. She counts as a value board.
Absolutely, Erica. I'm just trying to do the math. Okay, we could lose 2.
Yeah.
So potentially me and one more. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ruining it for everyone.
Okay.
So if we learn board member Jones cannot be there on the 23rd, then we'll.
We
aim
would
for
probably
20th
switch to the 16th.
Just in case one of us gets.
To
Okay.
include a buffer. That would be
Exactly.
ideal. Okay, all in favor? The second is board member Harris. Okay, I believe that was unanimous.
Eric can't vote anyway.
She can vote.
You were released.
I guess.
It's not the quorum purposes.
Oh.
Okay,
I've always been confused about this myself.
Yeah, that is confusing.
So we need an in-person quorum of 6,
yes.
but our voting quorum, I guess, is also
That's
includes.
Includes the
wild.
virtual person. Okay.
Wow. Okay, that's some new.
Does that change with the new Browning?
I hope so.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps we can make a note to ask the city for some clarification on that topic. Okay, so we are through our information and action items. Requests for proposed agenda items for future meetings.
I'll just share that our energy resilience speakers are confirmed for May, so that will be happening in May.
Okay. Before that one, thank you.
Board member Morgan?
Yes, I had a question about a public agenda item that came up last time, which had to do with the Mission Gorge Quarry and blasting. And I was very interested in what kind of follow-up is needed there. They had a very compelling comment concerning the city's action and the conditional use permit there. And it didn't make its way into this agenda for any kind of follow-up activity. I'm kind of curious whether it should at some point come up for additional conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the procedure appropriately for that would be if you or anyone else is interested in adding that to the agenda, we could make a motion now and we could ask the city to add it on the agenda or receive a report.
Well, I'm bringing it back up. If one other person has similar interest, then let's add it as the agenda item.
I do. If you want to want to move that, I'm happy to second.
Okay. I would move that we have an agenda item to look into this. I don't know whether that involves bringing back the commenters or through the city's research. It had to do with the prevalence of rock slides and the date on the conditional use permit. And I don't know enough about this situation or to even evaluate the veracity of the information we were given. I would just say that it is something that warrants our look. So that's not a very good emotion. I would just say that we bring this up under business follow-up. What's our agenda item there? Items of follow-up discussion.
Yeah, perhaps if I could make a suggestion for the motion is maybe just add it to the agenda as unfinished business so that we can hear a report from the city and decide if we won't need to take any further action.
So moved.
Okay.
Question, would this involve reaching out to the commenters? No matter who speaks on it?
I think we could ask Julia if we have the commenters' information.
In that case, second.
Can you restate the motion for the minutes, please? So is this an agenda item for under unfinished business for the April meeting or for a?
I would
future meeting?
recommend for the May meeting.
Okay,
Yes, it doesn't, I'm not bringing up specifically for April. I
okay,
do have the names of the two commenters. But no contact information, obviously.
I believe that they were with an organization, so it would probably be not that difficult to track down the group they're with.
And they're concerned about air quality related to the quarry. I remember.
Not air quality. I think it was the stability of the land surrounding it, the blasting that's occurred, the rock slides that have occurred. And then the sewage implications
Oh, yes.
here.
Sewage, and I think there was a public utilities connection based on my notes. And public utilities was not able to make it today. We didn't really have time for them today, but they are scheduled to attend either June or July at this point.
Yeah, I think the one note I have here is that there was a 19 million gallon a day carry in that sewage line, that they're worried about the stability of the line in that
From the
quarry.
neighborhood.
Yeah, I think this is over off like Mission Gorge.
Right, so the neighborhood sits
Mission Gorge
above,
Quarry, yeah.
there's quarry activities, and they're worried about those activities disrupting the integrity of that sewage line.
Sewage line, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think there's also, I mean, if we're concerned about this and follow-up, it seems like this is something that maybe, not to put you on the spot, Eric, but maybe like the chair puts on the radar of the relevant city department that would oversee this quarry work, maybe even to the council office.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I feel like if it's, I feel like it's something that could get looked into pretty easily, directly, without needing to agendize a full discussion. Especially too, if they're concerned about sewer line getting messed up. Seems like that's something that you would want to put in a call pretty quickly to a council office or to a city department.
Well, perhaps, I mean, my comment to them is that I mean, conditional use permits are not really under our purview. It's really more under the purview of planning commission and the planning department.
And ultimately the city council, because you can appeal those to the city council too. Yeah.
Perhaps we can just ask Julia if who's in the planning department to get an update. If there's anything they could share. My thought process was adding it to unfinished businesses. We can't even talk about it as a committee if it's not on the agenda.
Fair enough. So I also wonder, like, what is our purview in relation to this particular issue as well regarding resilience? It seems more, it's like a kind of more of a question of permitting and infrastructure, but I don't know. I don't know how it relates so much to climate.
Yeah.
Resilience,
Yeah.
generally, I assume that's what Eric is giving.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. And so the point being that the infrastructure that's out there, its resilience may be something that we take a look at some level, but also that if members of the public present an item of concern, I don't want it to just dead end in our hands.
Right, that's why I think maybe follow up from the chair or somebody, I don't know, but because it seems like it's also, it could be a more pressing issue than.
that's already being dealt with.
I don't know if it's being dealt with, to elevate it sooner rather than later, not wait till May to have a board discussion, you know?
I can certainly follow up with Julia and see if there's anything that we have. I mean, my thought is if they're coming to this committee and they're one of our few public commenters, they're not necessarily getting responses that's adequate. And maybe there's likely other things that we have not heard.
Right.
So that was my perspective. What if we don't make a motion, and I think I can add things to the agenda? I will follow up, and I think it's appropriate to discuss whether we want to discuss it further, add something to the agenda. Does that suffice?
Yeah, I
That
think that,
suffices.
I think there's like a more of a long-term thing as far as docketing for future discussion than something maybe a little bit more immediate. So we're not doing nothing and dead ending here, but
Yeah.
rather raising it.
Okay.
And this was, a-
I'm happy with that, yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
okay,
So withdraw the motion, leave it to the chair's discretion.
Thank you for your leadership, Chair.
so I'm just gonna record Chair Lardy to look into February.
Yeah.
Comment about backslide and integrity of sewer line to determine is an action to be taken.
Okay. Any other future proposed agenda items? I will just note that, you can always reach out to us. We do have a fairly, we have an ambitious work schedule the next few months, so, I don't think we necessarily need additional future agenda items. All right, hearing nothing, we are adjourned.
Oh, you need a gavel. Can we talk about that?
Get this gentleman a gavel. Ash.
Okay,
Hi, Eric.
see you next month.
Hi,
Ciao, ciao.